Hello, everyone. You're very welcome to this Film Audience Network event, Demystifying the Catalogue. This is a panel discussion, and I'm delighted that we've got guests today from right across the UK to discuss the issue of opening up access to archives and how the catalogue could be looked at and improved and developed to create greater accessibility and diversity within archives. My name's Hugh Odling-Smee. I'm the manager of Film Hub NI, and for the last 3 years, we've been working with Andy Robson as the Film Audience Network Screen Heritage Champion, create mechanisms for fan members to access archives in a greater way. We believe that archives are wonderful institutions, and one of the best ways to engage with archive is to enjoy them collectively, both to improve the understanding of the archives, but also to widen their scope and widen their reach right across the UK, in concert with the BFI's Screen Heritage or Screen Culture 2033 objectives, which is to create the most open and accessible archives in the world. I think I'm paraphrasing slightly there, but you get the gist. So I'm going to hand over in a minute to Andy, but just a reminder of some of the work that we've done this year, or these last 3 years, has involved toolkits created around how members can access archives. We've looked at specific projects right across the UK around opening up archives as well. And so this is the kind of culmination of those 3 years as the fans' first 3 year cycle comes to an end in March 2026. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Andy to introduce our guests and to crack on with the discussion.
Thank you, Hugh. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Andy Robson. I'm the BFI fan champion for Screen Heritage. And as Hugh said, over the last 3 years, we've been working with the exhibitors and members of the network to kind of build their confidence more with Screen Heritage, as FAN has been doing for the last 15 years or so. So one of the first things that we did was to really bring all those resources together in a kind of a toolkit. And if I maybe just briefly go through that, if I share my screen now, we can have a look at this, which is the resource guide. I just kind of quickly breeze through this, but this was an idea to kind of collate all those resources that FAN have made across the last few years. It really kind of brings together all the kind of contact details of the UK's regional national film archives, a kind of a broad overview of an intro to screen heritage programming. There was obviously been lots of different screening approaches from fan members, so kind of traditional Q&A screenings, as well as more kind of experimental, immersive style over the last few years as fan members got to grips with new technology and new audience kind of appetite. And we've had more kind of live score screenings across kind of silent era approaches as well. I like a map. This is probably in my contract with you, just to have an understanding of where all the archives are. I think it's important just to have that kind of visualization. But we see, it's just really kind of raising the consciousness and awareness of the original archives across the UK, what kind of areas that they cover in terms of geography, as well as kind of matching what the fan members have been doing over the last few years in terms of programming techniques. And we have kind of advice from programmers in terms of representation, as I said, more kind of experimental, immersive style, how film preservation connects with screenings in terms of kind of rep and classic cinema. Again, more kind of projected kind of gallery style exhibition, as well as highlighting Screen Heritage film festivals around the UK, alongside silent film festivals as well, and more kind of community video explorations too. Again, Britain on Film is an important kind of stepping stone. As Hugh said in the introduction, we're always keen to just have that kind of beginner's mindset, and we always think for any exhibitor who are interested in screen heritage but has never done it before, it's good always to go to the Britain on Film creative packages just to give you a firm understanding of theme. And through the BFI player, you can always go back to the regional and the other national collections as well, just to give you a firm understanding of where that film is and where it's come from. And we like to highlight the distributors as well who have classic and rep cinema. I think that's obviously been a very kind of interesting appetite from an audience point of view post the pandemic in terms of getting audiences back. Classic and restoration films have been quite an interesting kind of audience development for that. We've highlighted fan members with Screen Heritage Focus with a kind of an even style across the UK, across the 4 nations, and yes, highlighting those really kind of key film festivals across the year, both in the UK, such as HipFest and Widescreen Weekend and Cinema Rediscovered, and the BFI Film on Film, as well as more kind of the worldwide appreciation too. And yeah, just finally some more kind of sector organizations. For the second phase, we went looking for beyond the regional and national film archives for kind of the hidden moving image archives. So basically things, collections and archives that kind of exist outside. And we had a really good response from everyone. And we kind of marked these with artist moving image collections in terms of the results. There was kind of activist collections, as well as more kind of socially focused distributors and more kind of representative specialized collections with working class, Black, South Asian, Southeast Asian collections, as well as the global majority, as well as kind of highlighting broadcast and newsreel archives like ITV and BBC, which could be brought into screening approaches as well. So it was nice to kind of expand beyond the regional and national archives. But if we bring it back to this conversation today, it'd be really good to kind of hand over to our guests in terms of the things that they have been looking at with their recent kind of projects, particularly looking at how exhibitors can really kind of learn from these access projects and really kind of bring in kind of new learnings or best practice in a kind of a top line way, but also, you know, you can build on your specialisms and things that you've learned over the last few months. So I'll do an intro to our guests, Alex Day from the Northwest Film Archive, Storm Patterson from the London Screen Archives, and Elspeth Fisher from the Nerve Centre, who's been working with Northern Ireland Screen. Over the last few months, there's been BFI funded projects in terms of access, working with communities, and me and Hugh really wanted to kind of hear from those projects. So it'd be really nice to maybe just do a kind of a quick intro to the kind of overview of what you've been doing. So I don't know who would like to go first. Elspeth, I'm going to introduce you. Hello, Elspeth.
Hello, yeah, thanks, no problem at all. Yeah, absolutely. So as Andy says, I've been working with the Nerve Centre in partnership with Northern Ireland Screen on a contemporary collecting project called Northern Ireland Now. From about October 2023, I've been in post as the project coordinator. So I'll share a couple of slides just as a visual to introduce a little bit about the project and just spend a couple of minutes there. So that's my contact email, which I think hopefully everybody has. So as you can see from the banner on the first slide, our kind of strapline or ethos behind the project then is that we are addressing underrepresentation in Northern Ireland's Screen's digital film archive. So for those who may be unfamiliar, this is a large online resource that's managed by Northern Ireland Screen. And some of the physical materials are housed in our public records office here. It contains upwards of 12,000 clips dating back from the 1890s up to present from this part of the world. It also is the custodian for our UTV, so our ITV Channel 3 broadcast material. And it recently celebrated a 25-year anniversary. Part of where this project comes in was actually to address the gaps in the collection, particularly from a contemporary perspective. So when we are looking at contemporary collecting, we're kind of identifying that as really from the last 10 years. And so gaps were noticed, particularly in the collection from 2017 onwards, and also in key demographics that make up the population in Belfast and in the north, as historically we've had less of a diverse and representation within our archives, and also what was there we are interrogating and kind of trying to take apart, which I'll sort of mention a little bit as well. I want to show a very brief trailer for the project. This sort of shows a snapshot of some of our community partners from the first phase of the project. We're now into our second phase, so I'll just play this.
We can put sound in on the edit for that, Elspeth, I think. So I don't think it's coming through.
Sorry, Hugh, he's saying there was no sound there.
Yeah, there's no sound coming through. I think it's just the settings, but we can put that in retrospectively, so don't worry about that.
Yeah, okay, that's okay. It's mostly just a bit of background music for that wee trailer anyway. Apologies, I thought I'd clicked the sound button, but I mustn't have when I went back in to share. But that's no problem. That's just a sort of visual snapshot of some of the videos that have been contributed to the Northern Ireland Now collection. So in our first phase, we were working with 14 partners across the north, and we have over 150 new videos catalogued in a collection on the Digital Film Archive. In our phase two, we're focusing in on Belfast stories on screen, and that is obviously connected to our new site, which will be an archive centre in Belfast, due to open in 2030. We're hopeful that our on the ground kind of community collecting will feature as part of that sort of people's history. The exact plans of which I don't know in detail, as it's still obviously in development. But it's great to be linked in with such a large scale project, and for there to be that interest in diverse perspectives getting seen as part of our archives. So as I say, this kind of just lists a couple of our current aims. We're in our second phase, 15 partners across Belfast, and we have an aim now to have 200 new catalogued materials. We facilitate on site in community groups, and we try and adapt basically the project work in as collaborative a way as possible to suit each group. We run 4 to 5 workshops that are engaging with our history in the archives, as I say, actually interrogating what is there, what's perhaps misrepresentation of a particular group, and to identify how language has changed and what language they would like to describe themselves in videos that they contribute to the archive. We have no remit in terms of types of media collected. These can range from social media TikTok videos to perhaps longer funded documentary projects that a group may have taken part in. And as I say, we try and actually adapt what we're doing with each group to suit them. So for instance, over summer, we ran a 5 days in a row summer school style program with a group Black Moon, who are a club night that's ran by and for those from the disabled community. And they wanted to have club visuals that they added to the archive and that we made with them. So those were on display at their monthly club nights, and a lot of those are being archived as the second part of the project, because that was something that the group, who many of whom are DJs and club goers, is very important to them for that representation. Equally, on the next slide, we have a picture of the showcase with Soup, who are a youth group out of the Beat Carnival in Belfast, an LGBT plus youth group. And we ran a kind of Halloween half-term program of workshops with them around horror films, and that was in partnership with the VFX Academy in Nerve Centre. So they were learning about VFX, and then we were collaboratively archiving films that they made as part of that, and also existing films that sort of told their history as a group. So that's a little bit of a snapshot, and I'm happy to discuss further. I don't want to take up too much time for now, but that's a little bit of an oversight into the progress and what we've been doing with Northern Ireland now in our second phase. So I will stop sharing there.
Thank you, Elspeth. Could we have from Storm and all your work with London Screen Archives?
Yeah, of course. So with London Screen Archives, we're obviously quite aware as well of gaps in our collections. So we've been working on a few different projects to kind of change that. And we want to aim for a collection that really kind of reflects and represents London. So one of the projects we've been working on is a project where we've been training 40 Black Screen Heritage ambassadors around screen heritage, teaching about archives, digitizing their collections, then their home movies, and doing additional sessions with them around decolonizing the archive and non-Western approaches to archiving practice as well. And we are building them to continue working with them as ambassadors. They start reaching out to their communities and their in their areas across London, and we hope that will help bring in more of our collections and also bring in different things that we currently have as well. Another project that we are working on as well is the BDA, the British Deaf Association. They're one of our network members, and we've been training a deaf focus group with archive skills as well. And we're doing some digitization from their collection. They have a huge collection, but lots of it isn't fully digitized and catalogued. So we're working on that too with this group too. So that's some of the stuff I'm working on. A lot of it's kind of on training, but I'm hoping to have more stuff digitized, collected, so that more stuff is available for people to share and use as well.
That's great, Storm. Thank you. And I'd also like to welcome Alex Day from the Northwest Film Archive.
Hello. I've got a couple of slides, so I will share my screen. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so hello. So I'm based at the Northwest Film Archive. We're part of Manchester Metropolitan University. I am the projects officer for a BFI Screen Heritage project around accessibility in the archive, and also a project around queer heritage in Merseyside. I started in April 2024, and the LGBTQIA plus project started in April 2025. And before I started at the archive, I worked in museums, collection handling and management. And before that, I was a teacher. There's a lovely picture of our Mag Media vault there as well. So to kind of explain a bit about the archive, we cover the Northwest, so that's Cumbria, Lancashire, Merseyside, Cheshire and Greater Manchester. We were founded in 1977 and started as an academic research project about the cinema and film industry, which was really, really strong at the time. We became part of NMU, and we're one of the largest public film collections outside of London. And the collection can be accessed within Manchester Central Library, where we're based. We run in-person screenings across the Northwest, and some of our collection is online as well. The project that I'm going to discuss today and kind of take as like the route, although we've got loads of really exciting things going on, I think it's kind of most relevant to talk about the Queer Heritage in Merseyside project, because it was a direct result of our partner organisation, which is Cinema Nation, who are a community interest company, trying to find representation of the queer community in Liverpool within our online database and not being able to do that, which kind of planted the seed of the project that we're now doing. So the project aims to work with members of the community in Merseyside to collect additional film for the archive, to run workshops around community consultation, to talk about well-being, finding representations of yourself within the archive, to plan things like well-being walks, to gather oral histories, to create film screening events, to also just like have fun and build community and like have a cup of tea together. And we're also working on an academic evaluation of the data that we've gathered working within the archive in terms of how things have been catalogued. The screenshots that I've included are of a film called The Pink Pulpit, which is about a queer church organisation and a protest sign from a gay rights rally in 1988. One of the films that I've worked on subtitling recently is Invisible Women by Alice Smith, which is an absolutely stunning documentary which follows the two of the members of the Gay Liberation Front in Manchester. And the film starts with Lucia Fitzgerald in Manchester Central Library, where we're based, searching for a record of the movement and herself and her friend, and not being able to find any trace of the movement, the history, the women's movement, and being quite disappointed that like there's no record of that work and that history. And it's a bit of a full circle moment that through archiving that film and working on it, that record now exists because of the documentation within the film archive. So it's kind of become part of that ecosystem now that they do exist. There is a mark of, you know, their names, their work, and that moment. And it's a really wonderful film. And I've also added our contact details. So yeah, that's what we've been doing.
Thank you, Alex. That sounds fantastic. I think all three projects sound really fascinating in terms of bringing greater representation and diversity to archive activity, in a hope that it might connect with exhibitors, which is our main kind of focus for this conversation. We can provide some of those links as well to all your projects at the final on Film Hub Northern Ireland's website. But I think, as I mentioned, this is going to be a very kind of broad kind of conversation in terms of the kind of history of the archive and how we've all had experience dealing with exhibitors in terms of some of the barriers and some of the challenges that they face when they first approach the catalogue or the database or the keyword search. So I think just as an opening question to all of us, what are the main kind of current barriers for exhibitors to kind of access diverse and representative film material from the screen archive collections?
I mean, I can go first.
Yeah, sure.
I guess or kind of a little bit of kind of context, I think, also before we go into understanding archives a bit more. We live in a time where arts is often underfunded and underappreciated, and arts heritage particularly is kind of the even more underfunded little sister, of that, with a wider organisation as well. The often times where things are maybe hard to search in a catalogue is because we're often dealing with backlogs of stuff that haven't been fully catalogued yet. We're dealing with things that have been under catalogued. We're dealing with historic data of things that were catalogued a long time ago, so we aren't to certain standards that make it easier to search with our current systems. There's a lot of and archivists are doing a lot of great work to to make those collections better and easier to find. We want people to be able to find things in the archives. But often, if there's a couple of, sometimes there's different ways to search on different collections, but talk to your archivist, make friends with your archivist, and really that search and that knowledge, there might be other ways to find them, help be able to direct, and often a lot of them know their collections really well. So that personal touch is always a great way to dive into collections there too.
I think just adding on to what Storm was saying, again, it would be the same point to actually talk to people in the archives directly, because I know an ongoing process, particularly with LGBT materials in the digital film archive, is that they're trying to adapt and relabel stuff in terms of trigger warnings and some sensitive material from the past, which obviously is very important and is to prevent people accessing stuff that could be re-traumatizing. and so on. But actually that has then meant that some stuff is not publicly available for a time, which can obviously have a knock-on effect for researchers. And so I know that, speaking to colleagues in the archives, if there's stuff that is difficult to find for a time, they will be able to then steer them in the right direction. But it's sometimes obviously letting people know that in the first instance that can be a bit of a barrier.
Yeah, I was going to mention that like as part of the work that we've been doing within our projects, there have been quite a few things that we have taken off kind of the broader accessibility scale in terms of them being online, because we are putting in content notices and reviewing things, which means that in our big mission to make things more accessible, less things became accessible, because we wanted to make sure that they were safely accessible and that people had the right kind of caution before viewing them, and that we could kind of make sure that people were aware of things.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think context is really key to this, isn't it? And just say that all the archives, the regional and nationals, have very kind of different independent setups. Some of them are kind of charities, some are very linked to universities, and they've existed over different kind of timescales and their development. So it's really been interesting to see how over time metadata kind of terms have kind of changed with that. From my own personal point of view, it's always been interesting to hear from exhibitors and researchers how they kind of engage with the database. But in terms of best practice, I think we picked up on what Storm was saying about, speaking to the archivist. I mean, we've always said, me and Hugh, to kind of push people in that direction in terms of the actual archivists at the organization, because they're the experts of the collection. They know kind of discoveries and can really kind of help you with that kind of conversation. But is there anything else in terms of best practice when perhaps a new exhibitor would come to the database, and is there any more kind of advice for them to have beyond the kind of thematical approach that you can flag on the databases?
Maybe
I mean,
just
other than
oh, sorry, go ahead.
sorry, Asad. So,
No, you're all good. Go ahead.
I was just thinking that in terms of database, that it was just using lots of multiple different search terms, like keep trying different things, and kind of think of it as like you're kind of like digging for treasure, rather than expecting a perfect result on the kind of like search engine.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that's ongoing with development, the Digital Film Archive, in terms of finessing the search function. And something just from a personal level, because our collection is contemporary, we are in direct communication with all the owners of the videos. And so if anyone was ever searching for that and they had questions, we would advise them to actually go to the community groups themselves and ask about things. And that's the great benefit of what we're doing, with that time span, and we have direct links to all the groups. So if you were researching or trying to figure out best practice, it would be better to actually refer to the experts themselves who have been involved in the videos.
And I mean, that's actually just a good point overall with archives. It's a small world, and we all kind of know of other archives, of each other. Like, we will then obviously put you in touch with other people if they can help that research project as well. And we're a network of archives, so we work looking after film archive materials for organisations that hold it, but we don't have expertise to look after it. And we support, which is why a lot of our kind of our work is on training, and we're training and supporting those partners, and training and supporting people to create their own archives, as well as support organisations that have archive film. But yeah, we will always put people in touch. I think that's a really good point. Like, it's a network. We'll share, and other archives the same across all of the regions and nations, and those archives we all will support and share information as much as we can.
Me and Hugh can kind of share those contacts as well, either through those resources or kind of directly with any kind of exhibitor. We can kind of forward those on as well. Is there any other kind of key kind of best practice advice when you're kind of at the database or the catalogue and trying to kind of find that film? Is there anything else that we could do?
I don't know if
Sorry,
it's
Stormy, go.
catalogue related. Oh, sorry. I said I don't know. I have something that's not catalogue related, but is I think a really important thing to factor in, and it comes back to something I was saying before, and that's to make sure there's budget for licensing and licensing materials. It supports archives and how we run. And it means that we can continue to look after these materials and do the work that we're doing. Factoring in is things people often forget and don't do. And it's just really important to try and make sure there's a budget line in there for that. And then we can all be a great ecosystem to get there and share more archive materials.
Yes, that is something that we regularly remind members about when they approach archives. So.
Yeah, and just looking even, Andy, at your question around keywords, sometimes if there's actually keywords that you don't glean any results from, that can actually lead to interesting questions as well around why is that missing, and why is that not gleaning any results? And so that could lead to something as well. So in a way, maybe don't be deterred by it not throwing up results, because that's going to lead to something interesting in and of itself that you can then interrogate.
Thank you. I think when I was running the Screen Heritage Fund in kind of Fan 2, this question came up about kind of the limited access to material, or the limited material in terms of diverse communities. And there was always a sense of kind of reframing as much as possible, trying to kind of think metaphorically, or trying to kind of represent the gap in the archive through kind of different means. But maybe if we could move on to the question around kind of your project takeaways. Have you learned any kind of fresh ideas or insights working with your communities that could kind of help those kind of keyword searches, or just in general kind of help exhibitors kind of work with communities to put more kind of diverse material on screen?
I kind of going back to something that Elsbeth said as well, like with our training programs, we're training people with skills around archive, but a lot of outputs and outcomes coming out of that are people doing programming and sharing things that they've digitized, their home movies, or sharing their personal stories that are part of the archive. And that connection, I think, is really important. I think looking at what the archive is doing in terms of projects. So is the archive doing a project, a contemporary collecting project, for example? And then what are the outputs and outcomes of that? Maybe they're screening. Maybe there'll be like a screening program almost ready-made for you to then you can also use as well, which would be a great thing for exhibitors. So look at not just the catalogue, but also look at the wider archive and what they're doing in terms of projects too, just as what might be useful.
Yes, definitely. I would agree with that. And also in terms of, we've just, as I say, tried to be taking this approach of collaboratively cataloguing, and we have a fantastic cataloguing intern in place, Isabella Coben, on the project with me now. And we kind of take this approach of sitting with people as we're gathering their videos together and asking them about them in a very, I think Alex mentioned the thing of creating community and having cups of tea. That's actually so important for every aspect of our project, and I've learned so much from the community partners just from those conversations, and it then leads to more accurate record keeping, and so it's more beneficial for exhibitors then, because there's a direct link to that, and as I say, there's a sort of holistic approach to how the metadata is gathered in a way that is quite collaborative, and also probably to never assume the context of a video or of a group without looking at the wider remit, as Storm had said, because even quite seemingly innocuous terminology can have a really important context for people. One example of that was working in the first phase of the project, and that people really wanted to reclaim the geographic area of South Armagh, because their council district had changed that, and that this had a certain connotation in our past with our conflict that was very negative. And so for them, it's actually really important to have videos associated with different elements of culture within that region of South Armagh. And so that was something that, I would never have thought about as being a really important key term for them. But it actually was really interesting in making me reconsider, what terms mean to people and how they want to reclaim them over time.
Yeah, and I think kind of being in a room with people when you're watching a film together, there is so much context that you can pick up on. And there was a screen at the Working Class Movement Library, which was about an unemployment centre during strikes. I want to say in like 1983 in Merseyside. And just hearing people kind of respond and being like, oh my God, I think that might be my dad. Or that painter is such and such, and that's actually me as a child. And just really being aware that the data that has been put in with a film is it's a starting point, and it's a living, breathing thing. You know, it will be changed as we go, and the more that we find out, the better. I love going in and adjusting something because we've learned something else, and then update it to say that I've updated it and why. It's really exciting. And yeah, we want to share that, and we want to learn more about the material.
Are there any kind of key terms that you would recommend to kind of navigate the collections that maybe kind of sit outside of, you know, familiar ones that we kind of tend to use? I know I spoke to you, Alex, around the collection the other month, and you mentioned a really good one around student films, which I thought was really kind of interesting, how that could be expanded.
Yeah, so this has come up again recently, actually, because I did a kind of co-created film show, and the participants had asked for comedy. And so I'd say anything that is kind of subjective in terms of genre is not a good starting place, because one person might have catalogued it and thought that it was hilarious, and then someone else might look at it and go, that is not funny whatsoever. So that's not really a good starting point. But something like pastiche, you will get a lot more results. Student film, I've found, is just an absolute treasure trove of creativity, but also like of the moment commentary of whatever was happening, and what particularly young people were concerned about. And I've found some really, really incredible documentary. I've also put commission, so that's a good word to try in like synopsis. So it might not be an indexing term that we've used, but commission has come up quite a lot. And also interest. So like an interest piece came up with quite a lot of results as well. But yeah, anything like comedy, romance, yeah, doesn't tend to be as popular. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and perhaps it's really broad, but within for sure within the digital film archive, something amateur film for us covers loads of ground, and we'll have everything from very artistic Super 8 home movies to the Spence brothers making avant-garde genre films that will fall into that category. So sometimes it's not, you know, thinking beyond the broadcast material, you can find real treasures within that as well.
I think is, yeah, is there any more kind of best practice kind of ideas that we could kind of discuss, or anything that's kind of popped up from your projects, in not just in terms of keyword searches, but like how people have kind of interacted with the material, whether it's on a screen or has been at a kind of a screening kind of setting, or if any of the black screen ambassadors have kind of brought new information from those communities, or any other kind of stakeholders that you worked with. Is there anything to kind of add to this discussion from that point of view?
We can say no.
Yeah.
It's early days. It's
well,
early days.
Yeah, I mean, it's also early days for our projects. We're kind of kicking off the cataloging development stages now, really. So, and after digitizing and after training quite a bit, it's really interesting to see. Like, I mean, one of the best things is when people bring in we do home movie days, when people bring in their home movies and we show them their films that they've not seen, they come in videotape or film, and just having that kind of moments where people are sharing those are really beautiful sessions and things. It's well, what's really interesting is also having people who have lived experience of film being able to go, oh, I know this person and can make this connection to video descriptions and stories around those films. And I think both Alex and Elspeth have brought that up as kind of that contextualization that really helps our archives and build these stories out. And those are things I think that are really interesting to pull out as narratives within the archives.
I'm kind of interested in terms of, a lot of what we're talking about is contemporary collection, but one of the themes I'm getting from all three of you is that getting in front of the communities that are being archived is a really important part of the process, and engaging with it. And I wonder whether there's scope, as time goes on, those communities that were archived. I mean, I know an experience where one of our members screened stuff about the shipyards here from the Northern Ireland Screen Archive. And there were older men there who had worked in the shipyard and knew terms and were able to contextualize the material much better than any cataloger really could do, because with the best will of the world, catalogers don't tend to be shipyard workers. And so there was that kind of process. Is that something that maybe proactively archives and exhibition people could engage with, getting in front of people?
Yeah, I think that would be really valuable. And as part of what we do, we show groups materials from the archive, and then we have showcases of their materials towards the end. And I've had countless examples of similar to that, Hugh, where people have known people in the videos, have corrected information. Recently with the Migrant Centre, it was someone's cousin in a video about the Vietnamese community moving to Northern Ireland in the 50s and 60s. And they were able to tell us more about some of the context of what we were watching. So it's really important that, as we've said, to keep the archive material that already exists active and showcase it in different spaces. And then in the same hand, have newly catalogued material be kind of engaged with other audiences as well. It will just only add to the information we gather about it.
Yeah, active is a good word, isn't it?
I think that's a really good point. So I was going to say, if exhibitors are taking materials at you and you screen something and something that happens in your screening, like, go back and tell the archivist. Would love that. That's amazing. That could be a kind of a sharing that goes ongoing both ways. That information is really valuable and we'd love to hear about it. So do share back too.
And just on that, oh, sorry, go on.
One of my favourite examples of that was us screening a film with a football match in it in Preston, and the football match was in like 1929, and when my colleague Will presented it, he was like, we've never known what the score was. And then we went to an interval and someone was like, yeah, it was 2-1 to Preston. And we were like, this is incredible. Like, he just texted his uncle and he knew. And yeah, we took so much delight in like adding that to the record.
Just going back to Storm's point, I oversaw the BFI Film Academy specialist residential last week in Sheffield. So that's kind of 30 young people, 16 to 19-year-olds. And we had a lovely day at the Yorkshire Film Archive hosted by Graham and Megan. And we did kind of demos and tour on the vaults and some kind of film handling where the students got to lace a Steenbeck and things like that. So a real kind of hands-on experience. But essentially it was a real kind of exchange for Graham and Megan. They showed some of their curated packages around Lost Connections and the Miners film and Born a Rebel. And we had opportunity to have that kind of feedback from the young people. And I think that's a really kind of key point maybe for the archives in terms of getting, that additional feedback from the screenings to hear kind of fresh perspectives, mainly from young people, and their energy around their kind of hunger for, more of this work and just to learn and kind of reframe and have new packages that we kind of work with them through the week in terms of the theme that they wanted to explore. So, there is real appetite out there, but I think, that kind of dialogue is important for that kind of exchange going back between whether it be an exhibitor or a researcher or the archive. I think that's really important to have. So I think that should be added to a kind of a best practice approach.
Definitely, I agree with that. Exchange is a good way of putting it, and even encompassing what you're saying, Andy, there about having it as an intergenerational thing as well, where different groups can actually react to things at the same time, coming from different contexts. And some of the groups we're working with Northern Ireland now, there would be a youth group working with an older person's group from an area of North Belfast and discussing the theme of resilience in the archives and what that means. So that's been something that's been really interesting to actually be present with different groups of different ages reacting to the same archive material and asking questions.
I know I keep talking about best practice because I feel like it needs to be said and kind of expanded on. I think we've covered a lot in a short space of time already. So I don't know, Hugh, should we? I feel like we've kind of answered the question so far. Do you have anything to add?
Well, I just think it's really interesting, that theme of kind of engagement with community, and I think that I was not I didn't quite understand contemporary collecting in terms of film archive when when a lot of these projects kind of kicked off. But I think within the context of kind of engagement with audiences and engagement with the people who are being collected, I suppose, in terms of that, and not making a top-down process, I think that speaks a lot to cataloging. And speaks a lot to kind of, I mean, I'm really fascinated by that story of Invisible Woman as well, and that film that Alex mentioned. I mean, Alex, what was the process that sort of happened when it wasn't found in the archive? Was it a sense of kind of you were alerted, or somebody was alerted within the archive, and then there was kind of work done on it, or how did it happen?
So the film kind of follows. It starts with Lucia in the library, literally searching for herself and not finding it, and it's just, I don't know if it's a coincidence that it ended up being deposited with us.
Right.
And it, and then the film just follows them kind of discussing the work that they had done within activist spaces.
I just think it's really it's emblematic of the kind of issue around it. It's really fascinating, and and that the archive was able to kind of respond, I suppose, in those terms. I mean, is that story part of the catalog, part of the metadata within the archive? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
And what it does really conveniently as well is because Lucia is kind of firing out all of these different suggestions, she gives us a really beautiful list of possible cataloguing terms of everything that you would ask for in a search. So I then transcribed all of those into the terms as well.
I mean, I think my experience of cataloging is really much more on paper world, and it felt like a very structured, rules of MADs and all that sort of stuff, and felt very trained and not particularly responsive. I don't think, in terms of, to a certain extent, I don't know, this is my reading of my work in that, but it was the records fitted to the catalogue as opposed to the catalogue fitting to the records. Do you think that's changing more now? Do you think that there's, the explosion in terms of databases and in terms of all that sort of stuff has opened that up a lot more? That's not particularly to anyone. If anyone has any thoughts on that. Sorry.
I think what I had found interesting was that we have a very, very big document of indexing terms, but there are some that return no searches.
Yeah.
So we're now kind of in the process of going through and essentially re-indexing our indexing terms and thinking about how, if there aren't any, how relevant are they to what is presented, and how do we go through the process of adding more.
Yeah.
and certainly in terms of the LGBT project, whether you catalogue something as LGBT, LGBTQ, Q plus, QIA, queer, I think it's important that however someone may identify themselves, what they put in that box should still return a result. And that's where it has become really important to talk to people about what they would put in that box in order to access their own heritage and history.
Definitely, yes, I would entirely agree with that. And also some of the benefits of then working in a more grassroots way. One of the things we say with the Digital Film Archive is that it's not as tied to policies in the same way that a large national archive may be. And actually then we can re-index with people and update that constantly in conversation. And even things like related videos are all done, curated meticulously by colleagues who are seeing what themes are and commonality and chatting to people and putting that together in a way that I think, when we're engaging with community groups, people are so used to the dreaded algorithm that they assume that that's how things are put together. But when we explain that it's a really human-centered approach and that it has been meticulously curated, that's actually very validating for people. So that's an interesting point.
Yeah, I can't imagine the mistakes that AI will make if it gets its hands on cataloging. But anyway,
I think that's also something I mentioned this before, but like an archive catalog isn't a search engine. It doesn't work like a search engine. I think, as Alex mentioned, if you've got multiple things tagged as LGBT, LGBTQ, or queer, you have to search all of those terms sometimes in a catalog because they might not necessarily all be linked. It doesn't work like a search engine generally does. So it's a different way of searching, and that's kind of also when I said like the treasure trove approach. It's not to keep going, to keep trying different things and keep seeing what might stick, because something might pull something up really interestingly. So it's just that kind of understanding that it's different and just to keep going and trying.
That's quite a mindset for people, I think, as well, isn't it? I'm sure you get a lot of people who just sort of, why isn't it like Google? But I once I'm so old that I went to a university class on how to use Google. So that was a long time ago.
Yeah, it used to be a skill, but not anymore.
Yeah, I don't think anyone teaches that anymore now. Okay.
I just wanted to also talk about the searching and not finding yourself. I think is a really interesting thing that Alex brought up, and I think in the literal term, if you're like an activist who should be represented in an archive, but also more generally, people searching and not finding themselves in archives, I think that's also why we're talking about the projects we are today. We're doing this work so that people can come to archives and search and find themselves, and trying to change that, the kind of what has historically been across the situation that's been across archives. And that's also, like I was talking about, the Black Spring Heritage Ambassadors. We're supporting a couple of the participants to their own archive because they also want to start seeing themselves in archives, and they're going to create a small archive out of that. And I think it's really important to be aware of and share and talk about what the work people are doing to make sure that people do see themselves when they come to an archive and search.
Well, that's great. Andy, any last thoughts from you?
No, I think it's been a wonderful conversation already with lots of insights. I think it's really interesting from that comment from Storm about it's always going to be a different kind of relationship in terms of journey and screen time that you have. So I think that's something that exhibitors need to always consider. They're going to be time limited, independent cinemas. But I think, with encouragement, with a sense of curiosity, I think that should be a really good way of kind of approaching things. And it's good that it's not always formatted, I think. There's always going to be FIAF code of conduct around cataloging. And certainly we're moving into kind of BFI preferred terms, but I think, there's still that kind of mystery to the catalogue that can really kind of be enthusiastic for people, I think.
Well, yes, and as I said at the start of this, I think this is the start of the conversation, and this has been it's been really fascinating to learn more about the projects, but also just that wider sense of kind of the engagement with audiences and engagement with communities and the people who are being archived. And I think the work that is being done now, Archive is a 100-year 300-year kind of process, as we know. And so the work that's been done now will bear fruit in the future as well in terms of engagement and accessibility. So, well, thank you very much, all three of you, and Andy. On behalf of the FAN, it's great to talk and hear about the projects and things like that. So thank you.